You're listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Hosted by Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, and Tom Eston, penetration tester and ethical hacker. And sponsored by Security Perspectives, your source for tailored security awareness training and assessment solutions. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you. Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast, episode 73 for February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2018. So I'm Scott Wright, the Streetwise Security Coach, here with Tom Eston in Cleveland. Hey, Tom, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy Valentine's Day to you up in Canada.
And to all our listeners.
Yes.
Who probably won't get this in time, but we send our love.
Belated love. That's right.
And we want to thank all our listeners now for the love they're giving us, right?
Yes, absolutely. Ever since we started the new weekly podcast a few weeks ago, it's been great. We've had a lot of good feedback as well as just hopefully giving you some good content every week now.
And our target is to move up the list on the Digital Guardian's best security podcasts, right? So
that's right.
Go up.
That's right. This is the year. That's right.
So anyway, we got a really interesting show, I think, this time because we have some sort of new types of content.
Yes, we do. I know one thing that we talked about in the last full episode of the podcast was with that amazing thing of the month that we didn't really name, but
and we didn't get any suggestions, so we're just going to keep it called that.
Yeah, we're going to call it the amazing thing of the month. And I did want to mention that, but let's cover what we're going to talk about first.
Yes.
We are going to do our very first product review, which I'm excited about, for well, I'm going to call it a device, but it is a laptop sleeve, a Faraday laptop sleeve from a company called Silent Pocket. So we'll talk about that on the show.
For people who are concerned about their privacy and getting any electronic data snarfed or snurfed. What do they call it?
Snurfed. I like that word. That's good.
Snarf, I think it is. Is when
you
steal over Bluetooth or wireless connections. Yeah.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about a cool product that has some cool features and really interesting and glad we had a chance to look at it. What else are we going to discover this episode?
Then we're going to talk about the Intel Vaunt smart glasses. So this has some, I'm having some, I want to say good memories, but maybe bad memories of Google Glass when I first read this, but you'll get our thoughts on that here when we discuss it on the show.
Cool. Yeah. And then we are going to talk about a little bit of what we call what would you call it? You would call it an advancement in security over the internet, right?
Yes, and how HTTPS, so SSL, is now mandatory or going to be mandatory for most websites, thanks to our friends at Google.
So when we say mandatory, it's not like the internet, the gods of the internet are going to come crashing down on you, but
no,
more or less Google sort of takes their position.
Google is going, they're going to essentially yell at website owners in a certain way, saying, update your sites for SSL now or risk some consequences.
So we'll learn about that. We'll do a quick mention of a recent court ruling in Germany around Facebook real identities and the need for them or not.
That means I can't use my fake accounts anymore? Bummer.
Well, yeah. And lastly, we'll have a little fun with Kevin Mitnick. So if you know who he is, he's one of the most infamous hackers of the past few decades. So it's a little quote from him we're going to cover. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about this amazing thing of the month. Yeah.
So our amazing thing of the month is essentially around password managers. had a conversation with some colleagues just in the last couple of days, and this came up in terms of, well, what's recommended, right, in terms of all the different password managers out there. And I thought it'd be kind of neat just to mention what maybe I use and what Scott uses personally.
Yep.
And maybe share some of that with our listeners.
So first, why don't we talk about the advantages and the reasons why we recommend using a password manager?
Yeah. So, well, think about all the different passwords that you could potentially have for all the different services and websites and other things. It kind of boggles the human brain, right? Where we were not meant to store all of that information securely in our heads, because as you know, the big rule about passwords is you should create a unique password for every site and service that you use.
I was going to say I had a solution for that problem. The problem is using the same password on every site.
Right. Don't do that.
No, don't
Not
do
good.
that.
Yeah. Because guess what? The attackers, that's what they look for. Is so say one of your passwords gets compromised through whatever means, the attacker will take that password and try that password on all the other sites that they may think that you're using, including online banking and other sensitive sites.
So for example,
that is
one that I use in a lot in my sessions where I'm doing training is a lot of people, their work or their office telework facility lets people log into Outlook or their VPN through a user ID and password, right? And if the attacker knows where you work, they can probably guess your email address or your user ID. And if they can in some way or other get a password that you use on any other site, they're likely to try it on your remote access, which would be a real problem for your employer.
That would be a big issue. Yes. So the solution to that is to take all that management of the passwords off your plate and give it to something designed to store passwords securely, which would be a password manager.
Mm-hmm. So the way it does that typically is it will store that information and then encrypt it, right? So that it's not accessible unless you enter the master password, which obviously has to be very strong. Has to be long and complex, but you only have to remember one of them.
That is correct. So that is the one caveat to the password manager, is having that passphrase. So one of the things that we recommend is that password for your password vault, no matter what type of password management application you're using, is more of a passphrase, because that is harder for an attacker to figure out than, say, your significant other's name or your kid's name or your favorite sports
really
or other
point.
things that might be easy to look up. So, taking something like Mary Had a Little Lamb is a phrase, unless someone, of course, knows that maybe that's your favorite phrase. You might want to switch it up a bit, but that is longer and more complex, just automatically the fact that it's a
What
phrase.
I actually recommend to people sometimes is to take a favorite line from one of your movies and then within one or more of the words substitute a letter for a number or misspell a word somewhere along the line. So it's going to be virtually impossible for it to be guessed if you do something like that. But it's a good question though, is like, what makes the difference, or how would you make a distinction between the strength of a password that you would use for a master password on your password manager versus the regular run-of-the-mill passwords that you enter in Facebook or your office environment? Any tips there?
So it needs to be something that you can remember, because that's the one password, right? That everything else can be, random gobbledygook of, 60 characters, right? But since that's your main password to your vault, you have to take some precautions just to make sure that, first of all, it's something that you can remember, but it's also something that's not too easy for somebody to guess and has complexity to it, which is why, like we mentioned, the passphrase, something easy to remember. Mix it up a bit, like you had said, something that's maybe a favorite thing of yours, and then go that route. But there's also some studies I read that, they say you shouldn't write passwords down, right? The old sticky note trick, right? Of, oh, look at everybody's passwords are underneath their keyboard.
Right. Yeah.
But there's been some studies that have shown, keeping a passphrase in, say, like your mobile phone, which may be locked with a passcode or Touch ID, in, like, say, I don't know, your notes application, or in your wallet, which, you'll freak out if you lost your wallet or your purse, right?
Mhm.
So that's something that's always with you. You know where it's at. They
Yep.
say, and maybe don't quote me on this, but they say it's okay to write down a passphrase and putting it somewhere secure like that. But
yeah, it's an interesting topic because a lot of clients that I work with, they have varying policies internally as enterprises. And some of them say, don't ever write down your password. And some people say, you can write it down, but do store it somewhere locked up, like secure. And others will say, treat it like something that you'd have in your wallet, right? Where that you can access it, it's not likely anybody else is going to access it. So varying different levels of sort of security on your passwords in general. One thing I guess I would say is, if from the point of view of minimalism, what's the minimum you would have to have for your password vault or your password manager? I think most passwords that you're asked to enter, the rules at work, for example, are usually 8 characters at least in length, and then mix it up with more complexity. I would say for a password manager, you probably want 10 characters or 12 maybe at least.
Yeah, easily. And depending on the password manager, they'll actually give you some guidance around that. Like you can set defaults, you can, and it is interesting having used the password manager for so long, I still encounter sites that have either limitations or, even a very complex password that's auto-generated sometimes doesn't meet certain requirements. And usually I find it's going over the requirements and I actually have to reduce it. And so sometimes the
silliest ones, I think, are the ones that have a limited number of special characters that you're allowed to use, right?
Yes, those are the ones.
Why can't I use the ampersand?
Right. Yes, exactly. It's just stupid things like that. So.
Okay. So we got the security of the master password. So we're going to get into our password vault or our password manager. What'll it do for us specifically when we're browsing the web, for example?
Well, depending on the password manager that you purchase or that you use, a lot of these will have plugins for for your web browser, whatever one you're using, Chrome, Firefox, what have you, and they will essentially auto-populate passwords through the web browser, which is very convenient. So you don't have to open up your vault and then copy paste the password in.
Yeah. So once you log in with the plugin into your password vault, for example, any site you browse to, you'll see usually some little indicator in the fields, the login fields, that say, hey, you can get the password manager to fill this in, or you can select which identity, perhaps if you have more than one, which we're going to talk about later in around the Facebook story. Just which identity you want to log in with, and it will then put the user ID and password in, so you can just log in. So it makes web surfing much easier, and then you don't have to stay logged into all these sites, right? You can always just say, log me out, and my password manager will log me in later if I need it. Other features I really like too is, if we want to move on to the features of these things, they will have a place to store notes securely, right? So things like credit card numbers, for example, too, things that you might want to fill into forms when you're shopping. Those, if you're storing your passwords in these things securely, you may as well be able to store your credit card information.
That's right. Yeah, you can really store any other type of data. I know I've put checking account numbers and other things that I've had to reference for my job and other things.
Even things that I want to remember, like the product key for my Microsoft Windows. If I want to have to install it later, I can always know where to go to get it. I do that a lot. So.
Exactly. So it can go beyond passwords, which is nice as well. So maybe we talk quickly about maybe some of the products. So
go ahead. I'd like to hear more about what you like about KeePass, because I've never actually used it.
Okay. I'm a big proponent of KeePass for a few reasons. One, I like the fact that I may be a little more security paranoid than most, especially being growing up as ethical hacker and penetration tester and breaking in the systems.
Generally bad kid.
Yes, exactly. I prefer KeePass just because it's an open source software, which means that the code is available for anybody to review for backdoors or security vulnerabilities. Now, of course, the average person is not going to go ahead and do that. But I look at it as another level of assurance that there are people and there are security professionals looking at that application. So there are other people vetting the security of that app, essentially.
Yeah, very cool. So what else about it?
And it's free.
And it's free.
The other. Yeah. Free is good, right?
Yeah. Any particular features that you really love about it?
I just like the ease of use. It can run on your mobile phone. It can run on a USB key, which is nice. So if you wanted to keep your vault a little more portable, which your vault, of course, is encrypted, so you can move that around. Some people will store that up in like Dropbox or Box or one of those online storage or Google Drive, for example, and then reference it there. So it can be accessible from multiple devices.
Mm-hmm.
That's an option as well. So it's pretty configurable, and it can run on Mac, it can run on Windows, and it's free. So
nice.
That's why I like it.
Cool. So for me, I use LastPass, which has been around for a while. It actually was recently acquired by LogMeIn, which is one of the larger security, or I guess they do more than security, right? They do remote access and things like that. But LastPass, it's not open source, so it is proprietary for the most part. And I guess there's sort of compromises in either case. I like that they're always updating the capabilities. And even though they're not open source and people aren't able to audit the source code regularly, there are certainly security researchers who are always trying to push the limits to see, if there are weaknesses in it. And it's had a couple of incidents, I think, where I think they've responded responsibly in terms of fixing, issuing security patches. And in general, I think the architecture that they have is secure enough that even a minor breach, that's reported of a website or whatever doesn't really impact the security of the vault or the contents itself. So in general, I think any of these, highly reputable password managers like KeePass or LastPass are a good choice. At any given time, somebody could have a breach and it could, get a lot of bad press, and it's really hard to know whether one is really more secure than the other. But it's really a matter of personal preference on the features.
Yep, that's right. The one thing I will add is that, and one thing I think we've probably talked about on the show, is if someone gains either physical access to your laptop or your device, or say you have malware or something where someone is actually using your device on your behalf, it can negate kind of the security of the password managers. So just like we've always said is, if someone has physical access to your device, it's pretty much game over unless you take extra precautions. So say if you lost your mobile phone, you need to make sure you're using either an app or Apple's Find My Phone service to delete and erase the phone, right? So you're taking other precautions.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, there's a lot of interesting features in LastPass in particular that I like. One of them is, first of all, there's you can set the geographical access controls, so you could say nobody can use it if they appear to be coming from certain countries.
That's cool.
In fact, I couldn't get to it when I was in the Bahamas, but I had to use a VPN to get back to Canada. But that sort of cheats.
Okay.
But in any case, there are other constraints, like if I'm logging in at all from an unknown device, I can have it deny access until I get an email, and I have to click the email in order to click a link on the email to authorize access from an unknown device, which is a bit of a pain sometimes, but it really is a good security measure, I think, because you never know.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool.
There's lots of little security features that they've built into it, for helping you assess the security of your password, or, you can set the number of hashes for the real technical people. I think it's by default, what 10,000 hash cycles that it does,
crazy.
which are really quick to do, but it makes it much harder to actually brute force the passwords, right? But you can actually select how many hashes. So you couldn't have somebody do a rainbow table or something, complex or advanced to try and bypass that. If you've selected 9,992 hashes for your every time you log in, then anybody trying to do that kind of attack is not going to be very successful.
Great. So yeah, so hopefully everyone found that useful, and in the show notes we'll have some links to the popular password managers like we mentioned, KeePass, LastPass. I know there's 1Password, and I believe there's a few others out there as well. Yeah. And hopefully start using a password manager if you haven't.
And let us know if you have any comments or questions about the various different products. I'd be happy to talk about them in another show.
Absolutely.
Cool. So without further ado, let's talk about one of our new features in this podcast, the review, the product review.
Yes. So we have our first review, and that product is a Faraday laptop sleeve, which is made by a company called Silent Pocket. So they had reached out to the show and were generous enough to send us the Faraday laptop sleeve, which I received in the mail about a week or so ago. So I had some time to use the product and to kind of take it through the ringer, if you will. See
you did
how
any pen testing on it?
I did a little bit of pen testing. Yeah,
that's very cool.
So let me just kind of explain what a Faraday laptop sleeve is. So the term Faraday is essentially means that it goes back to probably your days of science class, right? Where essentially a box or a room that is shielded from, which would prevent any type of wireless or electromagnetic, type of interference, to protect like certain type of equipment, right? Or to protect things from getting out. Like if you had like a secure wireless network, for example, and you didn't want that to bleed out into the rest of the world, you would build a Faraday cage or Faraday walls to keep those wireless signals contained, essentially. So that's what a Faraday cage is. And so essentially they've taken that science and that concept and have built it into a laptop sleeve. And they also have other products where you can take any electronic device and put it into, into these sleeves or to these holders, and it will essentially shield your device from any wireless type of signal from essentially either attacking the device or from your device calling out, or any situation that maybe you need to lock down your device. Let's say you're in a sensitive area where there may be a high risk of you being hacked or threatened. One that comes to mind is like the DEF CON hacking conference in Las Vegas every year, where the largest number of black hat hackers from all over the world congregate in one location.
Talk about a proving ground, right, for Faraday cages.
Yeah, not a good idea to have your wireless on, your Bluetooth, your laptop. You may want to turn that off. But as you know, even with some things disabled in airplane mode, there could be other wireless signals that could be, like say NFC and, contactless payment and things like that could still be working. So, so essentially, and I do want to preface this saying these things are not for the security paranoid. These are just actually good things to have. In fact, a lot of wallets and purses these days actually do built in by design. They have RFID protection or essentially mini Faraday blockers.
Yeah, there were passport sleeves I've seen many of them in any travel baggage stores. You can buy those sleeves that you can put your passport in that will protect them from this. But it's nice to have a range. These guys, Silent Pocket, have a range of products, right, that
they do.
are built for different devices and applications.
Yeah. So and again, we mentioned some of the attacks too on the show that this type of device can prevent. So I know we talked about at one point about electronic car key fobs. Now, are vulnerable to attacks where someone with a device that's in a close proximity to you can,
Yep.
open up your car door and
Yeah.
those types of things. Same thing with garage doors and all those things. So
Yeah.
these devices are becoming more and more practical, and I definitely recommend them. Even if you're not the security paranoid type, it's just good to have, especially if you are, maybe for like with this laptop sleeve, you're going through an airport or another area, not just DEF CON,
Yeah.
but I would say too, if you are in a high risk job, maybe if you're military or government, or
Right.
a journalist or human rights activist, I'd say, these are definitely things you need to purchase,
Right.
to keep your privacy and security.
Cool. Very cool. One question that I had, and I don't know if you thought of this to test it or look up what the specs are, but as you probably know, cell phones in particular, they're pretty complex from a power management point of view. And I think when you're in an area with a low signal, it tries harder and harder to reach a tower. And so I'm wondering if you put a cell phone inside one of these things, is it going to drain the battery faster?
That's a good test, actually. I did put my cell phone in the laptop sleeve, just to test to make sure that no signal was working, and it blocked everything.
Cool.
That is one concern I'd have, is just around the battery usage. Like you said, a laptop or cell phone placed in one of those, in these Faraday sleeves, there is the potential, if your device doesn't automatically stop connecting after a certain period of time.
I'm not sure if a laptop has the same sort of signal strength circuitry or logic that a cell phone does. I doubt that it does. I suspect that if there's no signal, it just doesn't do anything. But I know that the phones do try, and I know that in areas where you've got less coverage, the phone's batteries typically get used up faster. So I would just say you may not necessarily want to use it with the phone unless you turn the phone off or put it in Wi-Fi mode, in which case, if you're going to do that and put it in the sleeve, you are probably paranoid. But
well, that was my other comment I was going to make about what I like about it is, the sleeve actually is very secure in terms of, I like the way that it opens and closes. It's actually got like a little magnetic snap.
Oh, nice.
But there's no physical snap. It just closes together and then it folds down and it secures it. And I ended up putting a 15-inch MacBook Pro in it, fit really nice. And then I put my cell phone. I've got an iPhone 7 Plus. That fit in there, and I threw in my key fob for my car, and that fit in there. So, you can actually use it for beyond just a laptop. It's a little bit tight, right? And I also found it fascinating that when I actually secured it, it actually holds air. I mean, it's almost airtight.
So you can go diving with it.
Yeah. Well, they say it's water resistant. So I don't know about waterproof, but yeah, it definitely seals it in there, and no wireless signal is going to get out when your device is in there.
Very nice.
I tested Bluetooth. I tested trying to call my cell phone, and it was dead. Deader than dead.
And you had charged it.
I had charged it, yes. Okay, but I didn't test keeping the phone in there to see if the battery would wear out. But
Speaking of batteries, the best thing about this product, you don't have to recharge it. You don't have to have
no batteries.
There's no
That's
batteries.
right. The other note I had too was I'm interested. I've got a business trip coming up soon, so I'm going to take it with me. I'm interested to see how it goes through airport security, because it says that it will block basically EMR radiation, static. It shields against static shock, and basically any type of wireless signal. So I'm wondering,
X-rays probably won't get blocked. So if it goes through an X-ray machine, it probably is fine. But I mean, try it once, Tom, without telling them.
I will.
And see what happens.
I'm going to. Yeah.
And then if they bug you next time, you just say, "Look, this thing is shielded. There's nothing in it, etc." Right? But
that's right. Yep.
Anyway, well, that's fun. Great. Well,
yeah.
Good job reviewing that. And we hope people give them a try.
Yeah, and if you're interested in learning more about the Silent Pocket Faraday laptop sleeve, you can go to silent-pocket.com, where you can order and find out more information about their products. and we'll also have a link in the show notes.
Awesome. Very good. So moving on, we're returning to the days of Google Glass, but in a different form, right?
Yeah, this is interesting. I saw a friend posted this on Facebook when on the day that this was announced. So Intel is creating, I guess what they're calling is it's more of an experiment. It's definitely very beta, right? And they're just kind of testing this out. But these smart glasses, they're called Vaunt, and it uses a retinal projection, essentially like a little heads-up display, like you see in a video game or something
This
like
can't
that,
go wrong at all, could it?
in your eyeball, which essentially is a laser.
Putting lasers
like,
in your eye retina.
yeah,
That nothing could go wrong there.
but it's lower than like a class 1 laser, so there's no like human, you're not going to hurt your eye, right, by using this. But what I find fascinating about it, because instantly I saw this article, I'm like, oh no, it's another Google Glass that's going to record you. And, there's going to be signs going up on business establishments that say, no Google Glass users allowed. Because if you remember, that was the privacy problem with Google Glass, right? Yeah. Where it could auto record, and no one would know that you're recording them, and it freaks everybody out, right? Yeah. So this doesn't have a camera in it. There's no camera. There's no buttons. It actually looks just like a regular pair of glasses. And what I like about it is it's designed to just give you notifications. So one of the examples they had was if you're, walking down the street and you have, like, say, Google Maps, you've programmed Google Maps on your phone, you're trying to get to some destination, it will actually pop up directions, turn-by-turn directions in your eye, essentially, in that glass frame, and give you these quick little notifications. So you kind of look at it as like a smartwatch, like a Pebble or a Garmin Fitbit has that now, as more of a notification. So a lot less intrusive than, say, Google Glass with a camera and all these other things. And I actually see it may be kind of useful if these prototypes are actually ever put out into production.
Actually, I think I may know somebody who's using one in a startup doing some AI stuff with it, and from an industrial point of view.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool.
So I thought, this is kind of the next evolution of what we're seeing around, the Internet of Things and other types of wearable devices. I think glasses aren't going to be for everybody, but I think it'll be interesting to see how these are kind of secured from, a privacy perspective, just from an awareness, right? When people start seeing these glasses, like, are those the Vaunt glasses? And people start questioning, is there a camera in there? And are you recording me? And, those types of things. But I think it's going to be interesting to see where that goes, and maybe some of the use cases, if this is something that like a company purchases from Intel, because I don't think Intel is going to have a great time marketing these on their own. I don't know.
It's probably not their typical marketing plan, right?
No, probably not. But nonetheless, if you want to read more, we'll have a link in the show notes, and that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to read more about this. I didn't have a chance to read the whole article, but definitely an interesting concept. I think it's, being a second generation kind of thing, it's probably got a bit better chance for a more focused use case, and I think we'll probably see some more success out of it. But I mean, just if Google had just taken the camera out of the glass, it probably would have done a lot better, right? Just from an acceptance point of view.
Well, yeah, and they looked really silly too. Yeah. That was the other.
Cool. Well, let's keep our eye on this one.
Yep. All right. So why don't we jump to our Facebook and real identities?
Yeah. So just something I picked up in the last couple of days. We actually had a post on our shared security Facebook page, I think it was, or Twitter, one or the other, about the decision in Germany that where the courts decided to block or prevent Facebook from requiring people to use their real names when they register. And it's an interesting sort of storyline on that, right? Because they didn't used to have any requirements or restrictions on this before. And then several years ago, Facebook started enforcing the real name policy, right? Where they you had to use your real name according to their terms of service. And they were a little bit picky about it, right?
Yeah, they were. They for a long time, Facebook has kind of mandated that you have to use your real name. In fact, they delete accounts quite frequently for what they deem as fake accounts or fake names.
Right. Interesting. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people might want to legitimately use fake names, such as
if you're a security researcher and you're doing testing, not naming any names, I may have done that a long time ago for talks I did at DEF CON. But
sure, yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of reasons. I know there's people actually go by nicknames more than their real name, so there are legitimate uses for that. So
yeah, and there is a certain amount of anonymity that some people in certain situations would like to have just for maybe. I mean, there are certain proportions or sections of the population where they sort of have different identities, across their social circles, and so they may want to be known by one person within one group, and there's nothing nefarious about it. They just that's the way they live. So I think it's something that's probably become more acceptable, and I'm sort of actually happy to see Germany putting their foot down on that. It'd be interesting to see how Google responds, or Facebook responds. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm also interested to know how the GDPR privacy regulation in Europe is going to affect that. So that's if you haven't heard of that, to our listeners, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is going to be officially enforceable, I believe, in May. It sets essentially global privacy regulations across all of European citizens' data. So I think that's another big reason that the German court ruled, because I think they knew that that's coming. So
yeah, and protecting the privacy of individuals is certainly a priority within the European community, and in Canada too. From to a similar extent, we have quite strict views on how privacy should be handled by businesses. So yeah, I think it's probably things are moving more in this direction. So I think Facebook had their time trying to enforce this thing, and they're based on what they're going through. From a stock and market point of view, they need to be. They're always looking for ways to be more creative, and maybe they can turn this around and turn it into a positive. Who knows? But it was. They did it for a reason. Clearly
they did,
and that was for marketing, right? They want to be able to target marketers to people and know who they are and as much as they can about them. So that was the reasoning, I guess, that Facebook wanted to do this, but who knows how they will respond at this point.
That's right. So let's talk quickly about the SSL website thing with Google. I just wanted to mention this just for our listeners, and maybe more so for our business listeners, that if you're still running a website that is not SSL enabled, so the HTTPS that you see in the URL when you go to a website and you see the lock icon and all the lovely green, right, that says you're secure. When you connect to a website and all the information that you send is encrypted, obviously very important that websites and services that you use are using SSL. But the bigger thing now is Google, for a long time now, have essentially almost delisted websites in the search engine, the Google search engine, that are not using SSL. So they've been doing that for quite some time now. So it's more of a benefit to businesses if you're not using SSL and have not bought an SSL certificate. You need to start doing that, because it can actually affect your business revenue, because you're not going to show up on Google searches, which is kind of a big deal. But now Google is going to be changing in Google Chrome the way that insecure sites, HTTP sites, are essentially pulled up in your browser. Right now, they show this basically little kind of like an eye icon for like more information. and you can click that and say, and it'll show you, oh, site's not secure. But as of July, they're going to start actually showing not secure, which I think it'd be a detriment to your business personally.
Yeah. And it's an
So-
interesting sort of debate, I would think. I'm sure there are people out there who think, I don't have anything secure on my website or anything sensitive on my website, so why should I be forced to buy a certificate or go through the process of getting a certificate installed, for example? And there actually are some good arguments in favor of this, right? It's even if your content in your site is not sensitive, the fact that whatever it is that you're delivering to your users or your visitors could be intercepted and modified or injected with malicious content is a real problem. It's become a terrible problem for a lot of sites that aren't secure or don't use SSL, where they can actually have a man in the middle essentially attacking the users that are visiting the site. So think about it in that context, and then you realize that once the first thing that a user or visitor does is set up a secure session to your site, then nothing can be intercepted or injected other than what you want them to see.
Right. Yep. And I'll also add that you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a certificate. There's actually a service now that's sponsored by the EFF, who a great organization that we've talked about before. It's called Let's Encrypt, and we'll have that in the show notes. And you can actually get a free certificate for your website, and they provide all the documentation you need to install that. So
and that makes the little green lock icon show up on people's browsers.
That's right.
Which makes Google happy and is better for your users.
Yep.
Cool. So that's almost all the content. I just wanted to sort of bring up a quick mention of a tweet that I saw from our friend Kevin Mitnick, the infamous hacker who now does consulting and coaching, but he says in a tweet not too long ago, he says, "So I went in the Apple Genius bar to pick up a repaired phone. At the same time, the guy next to me is verbally giving his username and password to the Genius helping him. After he says his credentials, he goes on to say he hopes he doesn't get hacked. If only he knew," and then a little winky emoticon. So, being unlucky enough to be divulging your user ID and password right next to the most infamous hacker in the world. It's kind of funny.
That is hilarious. Yeah. He should have just said something to him. You're like,
he should have.
Who I am.
No, that would just sound too ostentatious. Kevin's not like that.
No.
Anyways, thought that was fun. Anyways, well, we've used up quite a bit of your valuable time, folks. So we're going to sign off now. But we do appreciate people listening, and we'd like to get your feedback on what you thought of this episode with the product review, and also any feedback on our weekly feature that Tom hosts, the weekly Security Blaze. No, Shared Security Weekly Blaze. Right?
There it is. Yep. Any feedback? It is greatly appreciated. Be sure to follow us on Instagram. We've been posting a lot of stories and a lot of different, more interactive content. So,
how can you find us on Instagram?
Just go to Instagram and look for Shared Security Podcast in your little search window. And you'll see us, and please follow and share with your friends. Yeah, and just while we were talking about that weekly Blaze, maybe you could just give people a 10-second synopsis of what you actually cover in that specific weekly podcast. Absolutely. So the weekly Blaze, all that is it's a quick 15-minute or less podcast. In fact, I'd say it's about 10 minutes or less based on the last 3 episodes that I did, just covering the top 3 security and privacy topics from the week. And they're published every Monday. So actually early Monday morning Eastern time. So if you are getting in your car on your way to your daily commute, as an example, you'll be able to pull up the podcast, get a quick update, and be on your way. Yeah, and we should say that that is the top 3 as chosen by our editorial board. That is correct. The editorial board of Tom and Scott. Because we don't want to end up in a slump of talking about the latest vulnerabilities in Flash and and Office and things like that. But we like interesting top stories. Yeah, we're a little different. We like covering, the things that are going to apply to you and your daily life and your business. So, so check it out. All right. Well, thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening.